Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy, which is actually not all that little. This is the Kizer Knives Matanzas. So first off, I want to thank Kizer very much for sending this guy along. Full disclosure, this was provided to me as a review sample from the manufacturer. So thank you very much for that, Kizer. As a result, I've tried not to let this influence my review, and they know that I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk, but nonetheless, they sent it along. And so there you go. Next thing, size comparison here. This is a weirdly sized knife in a lot of ways. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 1 and against the Rat number 2. So you can see, although it looks relatively small at a glance, it's very long. It's kind of one of those very narrow, broad knives. Narrow and broad and not they're antonyms. Okay, anyways, moving along. So you can see here it's a long knife here. It's broad in this direction, narrow in this one, I guess. Next thing, here it is against the Spyderco Delica. Here it is against another one of those knives that's shaped in that way, if I can ever find it. Here we go. The Booze Blades Smoke, which I think is kind of a similar approach in a lot of ways. And then I think that ought to do it for size comparison real quick. And actually, I do want to measure this blade real quick, because I want to say it's 3.5, but yeah, so it comes in just under 3.5 inches, 3.47 some odd, with my high precision that I'm afforded now. Showing off. Anyways, so there you go. And then finally a note on this. This is by a designer named Swan, who I've actually watched for a while. He's got some really attractive designs. The Signet, because get it? Swan, Signet, as well as some other ones. And so it's nice to see him doing, and all of his stuff has been custom to this point, and so it's nice to see him getting into a production version with Kizer, because I think that's one of the best things that Kizer can do. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of your Swan Matanzas here. So, first off, on the good side, like I said, it's actually one of the best things that Kizer does, is working with small designers here that are maybe a little less well-known, or at least less well-known to the general production knife buying public, and making production versions of custom designs. This is, to me, great, because, well, I don't know. Not only does it reduce the sort of the jump between the custom and the production world, it means you can get something great from a designer you like, even if you can't necessarily afford to support their custom work. But it also gives Kizer something new and different. Kizer, left to their own devices, tends to make a lot of silver frame locks. And this is a very different silver frame lock, and so I appreciate that very much. Pardon me, long morning, guys. Next thing, let's, in terms of the shape of it overall, I love the blade shape here, actually, in a couple of different ways. You get a very nice little harpoon to it, but it's a very far back harpoon. I don't even know if it counts. It's borderline a thumb ramp for some thumbs, but whatever it is, it looks very attractive. You've got a nice little swedge on the top of it there, which is pretty subtle alongside the fuller and whatnot, but also on the blade, you get some flat area. You get some front. It's borderline Tonto-y, but a little rounded off there. I guess a rounded off Tonto isn't a Tonto anyways. But nonetheless, I like the blade shape on it very much. Next thing, the inlay on this is very nice. They've done a nice carbon fiber inlay, and it's actually beautifully done. If we take a look here and we kind of zoom in, you can see that the carbon fiber is beautifully applied in there. There's not really any rough patches here, and it's very much filling the entirety of the front side of this guy. The back side is completely without inlay, which I get with its frame locking and whatnot, but still, I like this inlay very much, and it's attractive. It looks like an actual material rather than just a sticker that's put onto the top of something, so I like that very, very much. The inlay here is great. Next thing, this does have a very nice low-profile flipper tab. You can see here that in the pocket, this is barely a flipper tab. This is not really a pocket pecker at all. I appreciate that very, very much. And it is actually completely hidden by this part of the handle when it is open. So this is a knife that doesn't appear to be a flipper except for when it's closed, at which point it's a flipper. That's a great little idea, great design, well done there. The clip on this guy is very good. It has plenty of spring to it. It's got this nice height off of these standoffs here, and actually, ergonomically speaking, it's not a bad thing. You feel maybe a little bit of hot spot off the back of the clip here, but by and large, this feels great in the hand. No complaints there. And actually, ergonomically speaking, it's pretty damn solid. With this little thumb rampy looking thing here with the finger groove, it's not going anywhere in the hand. This is a nicely designed knife for the hand, and I appreciate that very much. Then finally, on the good side, the action on this guy is very nice with one asterisk, which is that, well, we'll get to that a little bit later. But nonetheless, the asterisk, the action is very good. When it deploys very, very reliably, and it absolutely is Well, the shutting process is nice, and I better just introduce the elephant. Look, if you're holding down on the lock bar at all, then it won't deploy. That's not great. But aside from that, the action's great, and if you train yourself not to do that, no problem. Don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill there. But anyways, to me at least, that's what's good here, is that the action is very, very nice if you're not pressing down on the freaking lock bar. The ergonomics are very nice. The clip is good. It's got a nice low-profile flipper tab, a great blade shape, and a nice little inlay on the front of it here. And it's a custom production thing that's excellent. On the great side to me is the design, aesthetically speaking. Look, Nick Swan makes some beautiful freaking knives. I respect the heck out of him as a knife designer, aesthetically speaking. This is just gorgeous, because you've got things that, I don't necessarily love, like fullers and whatnot, but everything is just, it flows very nicely. You've got nice curves coming off of with the harpoon thing here. This knife is just beautiful on the table here, and the carbon fiber is very pretty, and then you add in these little blue pivot collars here, which are a really nice touch. I don't know whose idea that was, but it really does add a little dash of flair to the whole damn thing that works beautifully. I mean, look, Nick Swan knows how to make a beautiful knife, and what he's made here is something that is a 3.5-inch long sort of knife that still somehow looks gentleman's foldery. It's beautiful. I love the look of this knife, absolutely 100%. And so to me, that's the great here. It's a beautiful freaking design. On the bad side, first off, the price on this guy is not super impressive. It's $200. It's okay. I mean, they're not like ripping your face off or anything, but it doesn't feel like the kind of incredible value that we come to expect from Kizer. Kizer is a company that's really at their best when they're pushing the low end of that value curve. I'm sorry, well, I guess the high end of the curve, but when they're really pushing value, they're lowering the prices down. And this isn't so much that. There are a lot of knives that you can get with, that are flipper frame locks for $170, $180, 200, okay, whatever. But not a big deal. Next thing, the Crud Groove on this guy, or the Fuller is another way to put it, is just, I don't love them, generally speaking, and especially relatively deep ones with the sharp corners here. They basically mix whatever you were cutting yesterday with whatever you're cutting today. Not a beautiful thing. Cleanable, but not a fan. Next thing, the stock on this guy does feel a little bit thick. I mean, if we do a thickness comparison here, we're right up against, up against the Delica. That's pretty damn thick. And actually, I can give you the real number now that I have a caliper. Looks like 1.36 or so. That's a fair amount, 0.136, not an inch, 0.36. That'd be a little thicker still. But I just don't feel like this is a super necessary stock thickness, and I feel like this knife would be better in a couple of ways if it were a little bit thinner there. Next thing, the blade on this guy is coated. And this is weird, but you can see evidence. I'm going to try and zoom in here. You can see evidence, like, for instance, right here, where the grinding process actually removed a little bit of the coating down there. You can see that the painting on there is actually slightly offset relative to the coating. So there's a little bit like, almost looks like a drop shadow on what's put in there. And we see the same thing on the other side here, although it's slightly better aligned on this side. But the simple fact is that they've done something, and Kizer actually confirmed to me that this is a coating put on the blade. And I just don't get it, honestly, because Kizer is a company that tends to make very nice blade finishes here. You get nice stone washes. They can do a lot of beautiful things. But then they did this, and it makes the knife just kind of a uniform shade of gray. Unless that was a conscious design decision, I don't quite get why they're doing that, and it's just going to wear over time, and why, guys, why? Not a big deal, but it's something there. And then finally, on the bad side, something that is a big deal, which is that if there is any pressure at all on this lock bar, the knife just won't flip. At some level, that's good. That means there's a strong detent, but at another level, it's very frustrating. So I was carrying this guy probably about 25% of the time. I get it out of my pocket and I'd go to, and I'd get nothing at all. And so I've trained myself over the course of carrying this to keep my fingers off of the area that off of the lock bar completely. But this isn't a very wide knife. And so you really have to be careful about that. And so you end up gripping it in weird ways, like, taking this finger off altogether, and then you can do that. Then you can deploy the knife very reliably, but it's not something that flips as reliably. See, I just did it again. It's not something that flips as reliably as I'd like, and so I feel like this is maybe something they can dial in a little bit better in the future there. It's perfect if you're not willing to, or if you're not able to touch that tab, or if you're able to not, that's the phrasing, touch the bar, then you're great, but otherwise, not so much. And so, to me at least, that's what's bad here, is that any pressure on the lock bar causes this not to flip. And so for me, even being pretty familiar with flipping knives, about 25% of the time I didn't end up firing this guy initially. The blade is definitely coated, which takes away from it a little bit. The blade stock feels a little bit thick. It has a Crud Groove on the blade, which I'm not a big fan of here, and it is $200, which, although not crazy unreasonable, doesn't feel like crazy value either, and I'd like to see Kizer really pushing the value side as they used to. On the ugly side, there are the three things here. First off, the name. So look, the name, Matanzas, is Spanish for slaughters or murder. That's not good, particularly. Now, look, I mentioned this on Instagram, and I've said a couple of times this is the knife with the douchiest name ever, which is probably not true. They were worse, but still. Nick Swan himself explained on my Instagram that this was designed just outside Fort Matanzas, Florida there. And so there they came by that name, honestly. It's talking about somebody else's slaughter. But the thing is, honestly, I don't care. Like I said there, if your grandma's middle name was Skull Cleaver, it's still a terrible name for an everyday carry tool. Because in a world of increased pressure for silly knife laws and things like that, and in a world where the knife industry is regularly having to explain that no, these are tools for opening boxes and envelopes, names like Matanzas, Death on Contact, and other violent tool names are kind of why we can't have nice things. So although I appreciate his reasoning, I applaud him being a good sport and acknowledge that his other knives are just fine in this domain. That name is just a hard no for me. It drives me a little bit nuts, but I may be oversensitive there, let's be real. Next thing, and this one's actually on the knife. They completely botched the sharpening choil here. You can see that there is an area here that is cut out as if it were going to be a sharpening choil, but it's not cut out far enough to actually be a sharpening choil. And so, as a result, the heel of the blade is kind of a wreck, and so you get this little smile down there at the bottom, which leads to a little bit of a recurving on the blade itself. This is not good. I mean, seriously, it's there. You just need to take it a little bit further, but they didn't, and that's just not okay. Guys, come on. And so they need to fix that by just making the choil a little bit bigger. And then finally, and the ugliest thing by far for me on this guy is that the knife is actually, I often talk about knives where the blade is too close to the back edge when it's closed. You can see right here, very, very readily, this little smile that's created here by this bad sharpening choil. I can just, if I put my finger against this without even applying any pressure, I'm touching that. And then it happens again down here because the blade actually is sitting, there we go. The blade is actually sitting, there's a little bit of a droop down because of some of that recurving. And so as a result, down here again, there is an area where I can very easily touch the back of the blade here. And so this is just not good. Given that part of it is the issue of the sharpening choil, but anytime you use stock this thick with very tight clearance against the back of the handle here, it is always a danger. It's not as bad as some, but this is still a knife that I was having to be very, very careful with as I reached into my pocket and whatnot, and it's not a knife that I'd want to keep scary sharp because this is just very, very easy to get. Oh, no. And so that to me is just deeply ugly every time I see it. If you're going to make your knife close with very tight tolerances, you better have thin stock and a little bit of extra material in the handle in the back there. I get that it might not have worked with the design, but oh man, that's ugly. And so those are the ugly things to me, is that the blade is just too close to the back edge when it's closed. They screwed up the sharpening choil, and the name to me is very, very ugly. We can't afford to have those kinds of things going on. But so final conclusion wise, look, this is 100% a beautiful knife. Nick Swan is a designer who can make a really gorgeous piece here, and he has. The blade shape is beautiful. It's got a very nice handle to it. The carbon fiber, the pivot ring. This is a gorgeous knife. I love the look of it, as I've loved the look of a lot of his other stuff. I think he does great work. And even the little accents and such are on point. But the thing is, unfortunately, the knife also has some serious issues. I mean, the coated blade seems like a big step down from Kizer. The detent, especially with the lock bar thing, that adds a level of complication I'm not a big fan of. The sharpening choil is just a miss, and this is a knife that can cut you while closed twice, and that's particularly ugly. That's really bad. And so ultimately, this one really comes down to how much you favor the beauty over the functionality here. This has major functional issues, but if you find this knife attractive enough and you don't mind those functional issues enough that you don't care, then you know, maybe this might still be something you consider, especially if you're willing to be careful, or if you've got really big, fat sausage fingers that are never going to get in there, then I guess not a big deal there. But ultimately, I like the knife a lot. I like the design a lot. It's absolutely gorgeous. But with these kinds of very fixable issues going on that is still very, very ugly, I'm not sure that Kizer is going to make a killing on the Matanzas. Anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.